Commander Lisa Grant stood at the observation window of the station and watched the stars spin slowly past. The station orbited a small moon in the Helix Nebula, far from Earth and far from anything she would call home. But she had a job to do, and she intended to do it well. They had invited humanity to discuss trade agreements. They were an ancient species with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to hold centuries of knowledge. Their technology was advanced, their culture was refined, and their manners were impeccable. Lisa liked them, even if she found some of their habits strange. The strangest habit was their need to shut down. Every 20 hours, without exception, every on the station would enter what they called the neural rest cycle. Their bodies would go completely still. Their eyes would close. Their breathing would slow to almost nothing. And for exactly 8 hours, they would be completely unconscious and impossible to wake. Lisa had asked Ambassador about this during their first meeting. The tall had tilted his head in confusion at her question. All thinking species require shutdown, he had said. How else would the mind process the experiences of the day? How else would the body repair itself? Lisa had explained that humans slept too, but not on such a rigid schedule. She told him that humans could delay sleep when necessary, sometimes for a day or even longer in emergencies. Had listened politely, but she could tell he did not really believe her. He probably thought she was exaggerating to seem impressive. Lieutenant Park walked up beside her at the window. He was her tactical officer, a calm and steady man who never seemed to panic no matter what happened. His Korean heritage showed in his features, and his American upbringing showed in his easy confidence. "They are entering their shutdown cycle in about an hour," he said quietly. "Fleet Commander asked if we needed anything before then." Lisa shook her head. "We'll be fine, tell him to rest well." She had a crew of 42 humans aboard their ship, the Aurora, which was docked at the station. Another 18 were stationed on the facility itself as part of the diplomatic escort. 60 humans in total, surrounded by nearly 3,000 who would soon be completely helpless. It was a strange feeling, knowing that their hosts trusted them so completely. The hours passed quietly. Lisa reviewed trade documents in her quarters while they prepared for their shutdown. She heard the station grow quiet as the alien crew members found their resting places. The lights dimmed automatically to conserve power during the rest cycle. By midnight station time, everyone was unconscious. Lisa was reading a report when the first alarm sounded. She was on her feet and running before the second alarm joined the first. Met her in the corridor, his face grim. "Raiders," he said. "A full assault fleet just dropped out of hyperspace, 12 warships and at least 20 boarding craft." Lisa felt her blood go cold. They were known throughout the galaxy as brutal pirates who attacked civilian targets and took slaves. They were reptilian creatures with thick scales and sharp teeth, and they had no mercy for those they conquered. "How long until they reach us?" she asked. 20 minutes for the first wave of boarding craft, maybe less." Lisa looked around at the silent station. Somewhere in the darkness, 3,000 lay in their neural rest cycle, completely unaware of the danger. They could not be woken. They could not defend themselves. And they had 7 more hours before they would naturally regain consciousness. "Get everyone to battle stations," Lisa ordered. "Wake up anyone who was sleeping. I want every human on this station armed and ready in 10 minutes." Nodded and began issuing orders through his communicator. Ensign Maria Santos, a young communications officer with dark hair and nervous eyes, came running up to them. This was her first deployment away from Earth, and Lisa could see the fear on her face. "Commander, I tried to reach the command center, but no one is responding," Maria said. "They're all in shutdown. What do we do?" Lisa put a hand on the young woman's shoulder. "We do what humans have always done, Ensign. We protect those who cannot protect themselves." The first boarding craft slammed into the station's outer hull 16 minutes later. Lisa heard the terrible sound of metal tearing as they breached the exterior. Alarms screamed throughout the facility as emergency bulkheads sealed automatically. Corporal Danny, a Marine squad leader with broad shoulders and a shaved head, reported in from the eastern corridor. "They're cutting through the airlock now, Commander. I count at least 40 hostiles in the first wave." "Hold them at the corridor junction," Lisa ordered. "Do not let them reach the residential sections where they are resting." "Understood, out." Lisa moved to the command center with and Maria at her sides. The room was dark and quiet, filled with unconscious slumped over their stations. Ambassador lay peacefully in a chair near the main display, his eyes closed and his breathing slow. He had no idea that his people were about to be slaughtered. Lisa stepped over sleeping bodies and activated the main tactical display with her own access codes. The screen lit up to show the station surrounded by vessels. More boarding craft were launching from the enemy warships. "They timed this attack perfectly," said quietly. "They knew they would be in shutdown." "Which means they know about the neural rest cycle," Lisa replied. "They probably planned this for months." The sound of gunfire echoed from somewhere deep in the station. Danny's voice crackled over the communicator, strained but controlled. "First wave repelled. We have 3 wounded but no dead. Second wave is approaching." Lisa looked at the tactical display and did the math in her head. 60 humans against hundreds of raiders. 7 hours until they would wake. No reinforcements within range. She took a deep breath and straightened her uniform. "All hands, this is Commander Grant," she said into the station-wide communicator. "We are the only thing standing between these raiders and 3,000 helpless people. They trusted us to be their guests, and we will not betray that trust. Dig in, hold your positions, and do not let these monsters take one step toward the people we are sworn to protect." She paused and looked at the sleeping form of Ambassador. "We have a long night ahead of us. Let's get to work." The battle for the station entered its 4th hour, and Lisa Grant had not stopped moving since the first alarm. Her legs ached and her eyes burned, but she pushed the discomfort aside. There was too much to do. Corporal Danny's Marines had established a defensive line at the main junction, holding back wave after wave of attackers. The corridor floor was littered with fallen raiders, their scaled bodies piled against makeshift barricades. Danny himself stood at the center of the line, firing steadily at anything that moved in the darkness ahead. "How are you holding up?" Lisa asked through the communicator. "We're managing, Commander," Danny replied. His voice was hoarse from shouting orders. "They keep coming, but they keep dying. Simple math." Lisa allowed herself a small smile. Danny was exactly the kind of soldier she needed right now. He did not complain, he did not panic, and he did not stop. Lieutenant Park stood beside her in the command center, monitoring the tactical display. A bandage was wrapped around his left forearm where a piece of shrapnel had cut him during the second wave. He had refused to go to medical, insisting that he was needed here. "They are pulling back again," he observed. "That's the 3rd time they've retreated to regroup." "They're confused," Lisa said. "They expected this to be over by now." Ensign Maria Santos looked up from her communication station. She had stopped shaking hours ago, and her eyes now held a steady determination that made Lisa proud. "Commander, I've been monitoring their transmissions," Maria said. "They keep asking each other why we haven't entered our rest cycle yet." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "They expected us to shut down." "Yes, they seem to think all species require mandatory shutdown like their battle plan assumed we would be unconscious by now." Laughed quietly. "They picked the wrong species to make assumptions about." They were indeed confused. Their commander, an old raider named Vex Thorn, sat aboard his flagship and stared at the reports coming in from the station. Nothing made sense. His intelligence had been perfect. They entered their neural rest cycle at exactly the same time every day, and they could not be woken for 8 hours. His fleet had arrived precisely when the entire station population would be helpless. It should have been a simple raid. But these new creatures, these humans, refused to follow the rules. "How long have they been fighting?" Vexthorn demanded. His first officer checked the chronometer. 4 hours now, Commander, with no signs of slowing down. Impossible. They must enter shutdown soon. All thinking species require neural rest. But the reports kept coming, and none of them brought the news Vexthorn wanted to hear. The humans were still fighting. The humans were still alert. The humans showed no signs of stopping. Back on the station, the battle continued. Danny led a counterattack when they tried to flank through the maintenance tunnels. He and his Marines crashed into the enemy from the side, driving them back with fierce close-quarters combat. A soldier swung a blade at Danny's head, but the corporal ducked under it and put 3 rounds into the creature's chest. "Tunnels are clear," Danny reported, moving back to the main line. Lisa checked the time. They had been fighting for 6 hours now. Her crew was tired but functional, rotating positions to give each other brief moments of rest without ever leaving the line undefended. They noticed this. First Warrior was a young raider who had joined Vexthorn's fleet seeking glory and riches. He had fought in a dozen battles and killed more enemies than he could count, but he had never seen anything like these humans. He watched from behind cover as the same human female who had shot at him hours ago continued to hold her position at the barricade. She had not left. She had not rested. She simply stayed there, weapon ready, eyes scanning the darkness for any movement. "Why won't they stop?" whispered to the soldier beside him. "I don't know," his companion replied. "They should have shut down by now. Every species shuts down." But the humans did not shut down. Hour 8 came and went. The neural rest cycle ended, and Ambassador opened his eyes slowly in the command center. He stretched his limbs and prepared to begin another day. Then he heard the gunfire. He sat up sharply and looked around in confusion. The human commander, Lisa Grant, stood at the tactical display with shadows under her eyes and dust on her uniform. She had not noticed him wake. "What is happening?" asked. Lisa turned to face him. She looked exhausted, but her voice was steady. "Raiders attacked about 8 hours ago. We've been holding them off while your people rested." Felt his heart stop. He looked at the tactical display and saw the enemy fleet surrounding the station. He saw the markers indicating boarding parties still inside the facility. He saw the human defenders spread thin across multiple positions. "You have been fighting for 8 hours?" he asked in disbelief. "Yes. Without rest, without shutdown." Lisa shrugged. "We can sleep later. Right now we have a job to do." Stared at her as if seeing a ghost. In all his years of life, in all his studies of alien species, he had never encountered beings who could simply choose not to rest. The concept was alien to everything he understood about biology. "How is this possible?" he whispered. Lisa did not have time to answer. Danny's voice came through the communicator, urgent and sharp. "Commander, they're launching another assault. Biggest wave yet. I need reinforcements at Junction 7. Lisa was already moving. "On my way. Coordinate from here. Ambassador, please wake your people and get them to safety." She ran out of the command center, leaving alone with his horror. He watched the tactical display as the human markers moved toward the fighting. They had been awake for at least 12 hours, probably more. They had been fighting for 8, and still they ran toward the battle instead of away from it. For the first time in his long life, Ambassador felt genuine fear of another species. These humans were not normal. They could not be normal. No natural creature could function this way. He picked up his communicator and sent an urgent message to Fleet Commander, who was just waking in his quarters. "Commander, we have a situation, and I think we have badly underestimated our guests." 20 hours had passed since the first alarm, and the corridors of the station had become a nightmare of twisted metal and flickering lights. Commander Lisa Grant crouched behind a damaged support beam and reloaded her weapon. Her hands were steady despite the exhaustion that pulled at every muscle in her body. She had not slept in almost 24 hours, but she could not afford to think about that now. Lieutenant Park fought beside her, his injured arm wrapped tightly in bandages that had turned red in places. He moved slower than before, but his aim was still true. "They're retreating again," said as the last raider fell back into the darkness. Lisa nodded but did not relax. "They'll be back. They always come back." Somewhere behind them, the newly awakened were trying to make sense of what had happened while they slept. Fleet Commander had gathered his officers in the secondary command center, where Ambassador was showing them footage from the security cameras. Watched in silence as the recordings played, he saw the humans fighting at Hour 4, then Hour 8, then Hour 12. The same faces appeared in frame after frame, tired but still moving, still shooting, still holding the line. "This must be an error," said finally. "The timestamps must be wrong." "The timestamps are accurate," replied quietly. "I have them myself." Stared at the screen. A human female, identified as Commander Grant, was giving orders to her troops at Hour 16. There was blood on her forehead from a cut she had received sometime during the battle, but she had not stopped to treat it. She had simply wiped the blood away and kept fighting. "No species can function like this," insisted. "They must have some form of stimulant, some chemical enhancement." "I asked Lieutenant Park about this," said. "He told me they have something called caffeine, but he claims it only helps a little. The rest, he said, comes from willpower." "Willpower," repeated the word as if it was foreign to him. "The ability to override their own biological needs through mental determination. He said humans evolved on a dangerous world where stopping to rest could mean death, so they developed the capacity to simply refuse to stop." Was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked a question that had been forming in the back of his mind since he first saw the footage. "How long can they keep this up?" His expression was grim. "I asked Commander Grant the same thing. She said humans have been known to remain awake for 48 hours or more in emergency situations. Some have pushed past 70 hours in extreme cases." 70 hours. His voice was barely a whisper. "That is nearly 3 of our complete cycles." Yes, and she said it with complete sincerity. She was not boasting or exaggerating. She was simply stating a fact. On the flagship, Commander Vex Thorn was having a similar conversation with his officers. The reports from the station made no sense. His warriors were being rotated every 16 hours as their neural rest cycles required, but the human defenders never seemed to rotate at all. "The same individuals keep appearing in our scouts' observations," First Warrior reported. "The female commander, the male with the injured arm, the large one with no hair. They have been fighting continuously since the battle began." "That is impossible," Vexthorn growled. "I thought so too, Commander. So I had our technicians analyze the visual data. There is no mistake. These specific humans have not entered shutdown at any point during the engagement." Vexthorn felt something he rarely experienced: fear. "What are they?" he asked quietly. Shook his head. "I do not know, but some of the warriors are starting to call them demons. Others call them the ones who never sleep. The morale is suffering, Commander. Our troops are afraid to face creatures who seem to require no rest." Back on the station, Corporal Danny was beginning to feel the weight of 20 hours without sleep. His reactions were slightly slower, his movements less precise, but he kept fighting because stopping was not an option. A young Marine beside him stumbled, and Danny caught him before he could fall. "Easy, soldier, take a breath." "Sorry, Corporal, I'm just tired." "We're all tired, but tired doesn't mean done. Find a wall, sit down for 5 minutes, drink some water, then get back on the line." The Marine nodded and moved to a safer position. Danny watched him go, then turned back to face the corridor where the next attack would come. Commander Grant's voice came through his communicator. "Danny, how are your people holding up?" "We're functional, Commander. Some of the younger ones are struggling, but they're not quitting." "Good, they are awake now. They're trying to organize a relief force, but most of them don't know how to fight. We need to hold a little longer." "How much longer?" There was a pause. Then Lisa's voice returned, and Danny could hear the exhaustion in it. "As long as it takes." Danny nodded to himself. He had served under many commanders in his career, and he had learned to recognize the ones worth following. Lisa Grant was one of those. She did not ask anything of her people that she was not willing to do herself. She had been awake as long as any of them, fighting as hard as any of them. And if she said they needed to hold, then they would hold. Fleet Commander finally arrived at the main defensive line, accompanied by a group of soldiers who had managed to arm themselves. He found the humans crouched behind barricades, weapons ready, eyes fixed on the dark corridor ahead. They looked terrible. Their uniforms were torn and dirty. Their faces were pale with fatigue. Several of them had visible wounds that had been hastily bandaged without proper treatment. But they were still there, still fighting, still awake. Approached Commander Grant, who was checking her ammunition count. "Commander, my troops are ready to relieve your people. You must need rest by now." Lisa looked up at him with bloodshot eyes. "Thank you, Commander, but we can't stop yet. They are preparing another assault. We need everyone on the line." "But you have been fighting for 20 hours without rest. Surely your bodies require shutdown." Lisa gave him a strange smile. "Humans don't shut down, Commander. We slow down, we get tired, but we don't stop, not when people are counting on us." Before could respond, the sound of enemy weapons fire echoed from the far end of the corridor. They were coming again. Lisa raised her weapon and took aim. Beside her, Park and Danny did the same. The soldiers watched in amazement as the exhausted humans turned to face the enemy with steady hands and determined eyes. "Here they come," Lisa said calmly. "Everyone hold the line." And the battle continued. 36 hours had passed since the first attacked the station, and Commander Lisa Grant was still standing. She did not know how she was still standing. Her body screamed for rest with every movement. Her eyes burned as if filled with sand. Her thoughts came slower than before, and she had to concentrate hard to keep them clear. But she was still standing, and that was what mattered. The battle had changed in the past several hours. The now fully awake and organized had joined the defensive lines alongside the humans. Fleet Commander had proven himself a capable leader, directing his people with calm authority. But even with the added numbers, the situation remained desperate. They had brought more troops from their ships. They seemed determined to take the station no matter the cost. Lieutenant Park sat against a wall near the command center, his injured arm cradled against his chest. A medic had finally convinced him to accept proper treatment, but he had refused to leave his post. He managed the tactical display from where he sat, calling out enemy positions and coordinating the defense. "Another wave forming in Sector 7, he reported, his voice rough with fatigue. Lisa acknowledged the information and relayed orders to the troops in that area. Then she turned to find Ambassador standing beside her, his large dark eyes studying her with a mixture of fascination and concern. "Commander Grant, I must ask you something," he said. "When will you need to enter your rest cycle?" Lisa blinked at him slowly. The question seemed to come from very far away. "We don't have rest cycles," she said. "Not like you do. We can push through when we need to." "But for how long? Surely there must be a limit." Lisa considered the question. She had been awake for nearly 40 hours now. She had pushed past the initial exhaustion around hour 24, entered a strange state of clarity around hour 30, and was now operating on something that felt like automatic control. Humans have stayed awake for over 70 hours in documented cases, she said. Most of us can manage 48 without serious problems. After that, it gets harder, but it can be done. His expression shifted to something like horror. 48 hours. That is 2 complete cycles of our rest period. You are telling me that humans can remain conscious and functional for that entire duration. In emergencies, yes. We don't like it, it's not healthy, but we can do it. The ambassador was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. On my world, there are legends of ancient creatures that never slept. They were considered monsters, beings of nightmare that existed only to terrify children. I never imagined I would meet such creatures in reality. Lisa would have laughed if she had the energy. Instead, she just shook her head. We're not monsters, Ambassador. We're just stubborn. Across the station, Corporal Danny was proving exactly how stubborn humans could be. He had been fighting for 38 hours straight. His muscles ached with a deep pain that never faded. His vision sometimes blurred at the edges, and he had to blink hard to clear it. But every time they came, he was there to meet them. The enemy soldiers had started to recognize him. He could see it in their eyes when they spotted him at the barricade. They hesitated now, just for a moment, before attacking. That hesitation had cost more than a few of them their lives. A young soldier named Callan fought beside Danny at the junction. The alien was brave enough, but he could not hide his amazement at the human beside him. "You have been here since I arrived 6 hours ago," Callan said during a brief pause in the fighting. "Were you here before that as well?" "I've been here since the beginning," Danny replied. "The beginning, but that was over 30 hours ago." 38 actually. Callan stared at him. "How are you still functioning?" Danny checked his weapon and shrugged. "Training, discipline, coffee when I can get it, and a whole lot of not wanting to die." The soldier had no response to that. On the flagship, Commander Vex Thorn was facing a crisis among his officers. The assault had lasted far longer than planned, and his troops were exhausted. They had been rotating constantly to accommodate their shutdown cycles, but morale was crumbling. "The humans never stop," one of his captains reported. "Our warriors are terrified of them. They believe these creatures are not truly alive, that they are some kind of machine or demon wearing flesh." "They are alive," Vexthorn growled. "We have killed some of them. They bleed and die like any other creature. But they do not rest like any other creature. The same ones keep appearing on the front lines. They should have collapsed long ago, but they continue fighting as if time has no meaning to them." First warrior stepped forward. "Commander, I have studied the recordings carefully. I believe I understand what we are facing." "Then explain it." Took a deep breath. "The humans are not machines or demons. They are predators, but not the kind we know. They do not rely on speed or strength or ambush tactics. They simply refuse to stop. They will chase their prey until it collapses from exhaustion, and then they will strike. We are the prey now, Commander, and they are wearing us down." The bridge was silent. Vex Thorn looked at the tactical display at the station that should have fallen hours ago. His fleet was still strong, his numbers still superior, but his warriors were afraid, and afraid soldiers made mistakes. "We will launch one final assault," he decided. "Everything we have. If the humans are as exhausted as they should be, they cannot withstand our full force." Back on the station, Ensign Maria Santos collapsed at her communications post. One moment she was monitoring enemy transmissions. The next she was on the floor with concerned faces hovering above her. A medic rushed over and began checking her vital signs. "She has exhausted herself," the medic reported. "Her body has simply stopped functioning properly." Commander Grant was at Maria's side in moments. "Get her to medical. Make sure she rests." But even as the medic carried Maria away, something remarkable happened. 2 hours later, the young ensign appeared at the command center door, pale and unsteady but determined. "I'm ready to return to my post, Commander," she said. Lisa stared at her. "Maria, you collapsed. You need to rest." "I rested 2 hours. I'm functional enough to work." The medical officer who had followed Maria looked utterly bewildered. "I told her she needed at least 8 hours of recovery. She refused. She said something called a combat nap would be sufficient." Lisa wanted to order Maria back to bed, but she could not deny that they needed every person they could get. And if Maria said she could function, Lisa believed her. "Take the secondary communication station," Lisa said finally. "If you start to fade, you tell me immediately." Maria nodded and moved to her position. Fleet Commander watched this exchange with growing unease. The human had collapsed from exhaustion, slept for 2 hours, and returned to duty. The concept was so foreign to his understanding of biology that he could not fully process it. "Your species is remarkable," he said to Lisa, "and also somewhat terrifying." Before Lisa could respond, Park's voice cut through the room. "Commander, sensors are detecting a massive energy buildup in the fleet. They're preparing to launch everything they have." Lisa straightened her shoulders and pushed her exhaustion aside. There would be time to rest later. Right now, she had a battle to win. "All hands to defensive positions. This is going to be their final push. If we hold them here, we win." She paused and looked at the tired faces around her, human and alike. "We've held for 36 hours. We can hold a little longer." The final assault came like a storm of fire and fury. Commander Vex Thorn had committed everything to this attack. Every warrior, every weapon, every ship in his fleet focused on breaking through the station's defenses. If the humans could truly fight without rest, then he would simply overwhelm them with numbers. For 3 terrible hours, the battle raged through every corridor and junction of the station. The defenders were pushed back, then pushed back again. Casualties mounted on both sides. The air filled with smoke and the sounds of combat. And through it all, the humans refused to fall. Commander Lisa Grant fought at the front line, her weapon never silent. She had been awake for over 39 hours now, and her body moved on instinct rather than thought. Every motion was automatic, trained into her muscles through years of practice. Aim, fire, move, repeat. Corporal Danny held the critical junction at Sector 7, with a handful of Marines and twice as many soldiers. They threw wave after wave against his position, but Danny refused to give ground. "They want this corridor," he shouted to his troops. "They can pay for it in blood." Lieutenant Park coordinated the defense from the command center, his injured arm now completely numb. He tracked enemy movements, called out warnings, and directed reinforcements to wherever they were needed most. And then, just when it seemed the defenders might finally break, everything changed. A new signal appeared on the tactical display, then another, then a dozen more. "Commander," called out, his voice cracking with emotion. "Human reinforcements have arrived. The Aurora called for help when the attack started, and the 7th Fleet responded." Lisa felt tears prick at her exhausted eyes. The 7th Fleet, Earth's fastest response force, stationed 2 systems away. They must have pushed their engines to the limit to arrive this quickly. They saw the new ships too. Their assault faltered as the human warships emerged from hyperspace and immediately opened fire on the raider fleet. These new humans were fresh, rested, and very angry. Commander Vex Thorn watched his tactical display with despair. His fleet was battered from the long siege. His warriors were exhausted from cycling through endless shutdown periods, and now fresh enemies were pouring into the system. "All ships retreat," he ordered. "We are leaving." They fled. On the station, the defenders watched in disbelief as the enemy boarding parties began pulling back toward their ships. The sounds of combat faded. The corridors fell silent one by one. Lisa Grant lowered her weapon slowly. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fatting. Her legs threatened to collapse beneath her. "Is it over?" someone asked. "It's over," she confirmed. "They are running." A cheer went up from the defenders, human and alike. Soldiers embraced each other. Some collapsed where they stood, finally allowing their bodies to rest. The battle for the station had lasted 41 hours, and the human defenders had held throughout. Lisa made it back to the command center before her body finally gave out. She sat down in a chair beside the tactical display and immediately fell into a deep sleep. She did not wake for 14 hours. When she finally opened her eyes, she found Ambassador sitting nearby, watching her with an expression of quiet wonder. "You have returned to us, Commander," he said gently. Lisa rubbed her eyes and stretched her aching muscles. "How long was I out?" 14 hours. Your medical officer said you needed at least 20, but she could not keep you sedated any longer." Lisa nodded slowly. 14 hours felt like both too much and not nearly enough. Though she asked, "Gone." Your 7th Fleet pursued them for several hours before breaking off. Commander Vex Thorn was captured when his flagship was disabled. He is currently being held in your brig. Lisa absorbed this information. They had won. Against all odds, they had held the station and protected the. Over the following days, the story of the battle spread across the galaxy. Ambassador submitted his official report to the Galactic Council, describing in detail how 60 humans had defended 3,000 for over 40 hours without rest. He included footage from the security cameras, showing the same tired faces appearing again and again on the front lines. "They are not like us," he wrote in his conclusion. "They do not shut down. They do not stop. They simply continue forward, driven by something they call willpower, until their objective is achieved or their bodies physically fail. I have consulted with biologists and evolutionary experts, and the consensus is that humans evolved on a world so dangerous that stopping to rest could mean death. They developed the ability to override their own need for shutdown, to push past exhaustion through pure mental determination. They call themselves persistence predators, beings who hunt not through speed or strength, but through the simple refusal to quit. I believe this makes them either the most valuable allies in the galaxy or the most terrifying enemies. Perhaps both." Fleet Commander offered a formal apology to Commander Grant for doubting humanity's capabilities. He also proposed a permanent defense alliance between the and the human species. "Any species that would fight for 40 hours to protect strangers is a species we want beside us," he declared. Word of the battle reached other civilizations. Species who had been considering raids against human colonies quietly abandoned their plans. Those who had dismissed humans as a minor power began to reconsider. Commander Vex Thorn, the captured leader, was permitted one conversation with Lieutenant Park before being transferred to a proper detention facility. "I have one question," Vex Thorn said through the barrier of his cell. "Throughout the entire battle, I kept waiting for your people to enter your rest cycle. It never happened. Do you ever truly rest?" Looked at the old raider with a calm expression. The bandages were off his arm now, revealing a healing scar that would stay with him forever. "Only when we choose to," he replied. Vex Thorn nodded slowly. There was no defiance left in him, only a weary acceptance of defeat. "Then we never had a chance," he said quietly. "From the very beginning, we never had a chance." On the day the human reinforcements finally departed, Ambassador came to say goodbye to Commander Grant. She was still recovering from her ordeal, but she stood tall and proud on the docking platform. "You saved my people," the ambassador said simply. "We will never forget this." "We did what anyone would do," Lisa replied. Shook his head. "No, Commander, you did what only humans could do. You faced an impossible situation and refused to accept defeat. You pushed your bodies beyond all reasonable limits. You protected those who could not protect themselves, even at great cost to yourselves. That is not what anyone would do. That is what heroes do. Lisa felt her cheeks warm at the praise. She was not comfortable being called a hero. She had simply done her job. But as her ship pulled away from the station and turned toward Earth, she allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. Across the galaxy, the story continued to spread. Species who had never heard of Earth now whispered about the humans who never stopped. Parents told their children tales of the creatures who could fight for days without rest. Warriors studied the battle recordings, trying to understand how such a thing was possible. And a new truth settled into the collective consciousness of the galactic community. You could outgun humanity. You could outnumber them. You could catch them by surprise or fight them on unfavorable ground. But you could never, ever outlast them. Because humans did not power down. They did not stop. They simply kept going, driven by something the galaxy was only beginning to understand. They called it determination. They called it stubbornness. They called it the refusal to quit. Whatever it was, it had saved the station, and it would continue to shape the galaxy's understanding of humanity for generations to come.